Can I first of all just thank Rebecca for doing this? Rebecca's worked at Whitechapel Art Gallery at the Serpentine and actually edited one of my favourite books of all time on Ellsworth Kelly, which is a very proud book on my bookshelves. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. I asked Mike earlier this week whether he wanted to focus particularly on the exhibition or anything else, and he said, "Oh, ask me anything." So I've spent the
week,
exactly. I've spent the week just like thinking of all the things I've ever wanted to ask Mike, and so I have a very random list of questions. But I think maybe that could be nice. I think hopefully we'll cover some things that haven't been covered before. And yeah, I mean, I've only really known Mike about sort of 3 years or so. I was working in London for a long time and moved back up here during the pandemic. And I guess it was really through Nick Kennedy and Rachel Clulo, who are artists who I have known for a bit longer, who had sort of mentioned, "Oh, you must meet Mike." And I guess I'd known of your name, it had come up from people who'd you'd been their tutor at university as well, but I really didn't know that much about your art. So I sort of just invited myself to his studio, and we sort of launched into probably just chatting about whatever it was you were working at that moment. So I really never really sort of stopped to sort of ask some of the bigger questions about, you as an artist. So I thought that might be quite a useful place to start, with really just what was it that made you decide to pursue a career in the arts?
That's interesting. It
was 1830 now, so
I'm going to storm out. When I was in the sixth form, well, it was called sixth form then. What is it now? Year 12 and 13, isn't it? I think. I was going to be an architect. Well, that was the kind of plan. So I was doing maths, physics, and I wasn't allowed to do art at school. So I did art on my own. Gave up physics after a while and did geography because I found that quite tough. But anyway, I had a lovely guy next door to me who was an architect in the civic centre. He was a civic architect. I said, "Oh, I'll take you around to have a look at the offices." So he took me around, and I thought, "My God, I don't want to do this," because it was like an office job and everything. So after that, there was no looking back really. I just wanted to study. I've been drawing since working since I was 8 or 9.
And were there particular artists that you were aware of at that point in your
life? The artist whose work I still like was Kandinsky. And I did my own. I did my sixth form thesis on Kandinsky, and I still look at his work today as well.
And how would you come across his work?
Just from, one of the fantastic things about art is you're always finding out new things. That was the first new thing I found out about when I was in the lower sixth then, and I went to the Picton Library in Liverpool, which is a beautiful library, beautiful space, and they had loads of art books, and I just browsed the books and I loved Kandinsky's work.
So then you went to Goldsmiths in London.
I did my foundation course at Liverpool,
right,
and then went down to Goldsmiths.
Yeah, and to do fine art.
But
then ended up working in a gallery in the ICA in London.
Yeah, I was chair of the New Contemporaries back then, and it was very different to what it is now. So the New Contemporaries there was a permanent committee of artists who were teachers in the art schools, mainly in London, and then the student committee actually ran the show and organised the show, and the permanent committee were just kind of advisors. And I organised the first film performance and video part of that, which in a way kind of cut out my career as a painting tutor, because the artists, there were sculptors and painters who were the permanent committee, and they said, "Yeah, go and do that if you want, but we won't." I didn't get much backing from them. So I got together another committee with Ron Hazen and Stuart Brisley, in particular, and the guys from Acme Gallery when it was going in as a gallery in Covent Garden. So the first New Contemporaries live work show was there, and then I went to work at the ICA, and I took that show to the ICA. So there was 2 years of the New Contemporaries the ICA.
So you were very involved in sort of putting on exhibitions and that side of things. But were you always making work alongside that?
I was, yeah. I mean, in some respects, I often wish that I didn't. I should have shut up, basically. In our tutorials, I always was talking and, arguing and engaging with the debate, which I think made me an obvious choice for the new contemporaries. And it took over my life, actually, that for a year. So I kind of missed out a bit on that. But anyway, it was a great experience.
And then you came up to the northeast.
Well, I went freelance for 5 years, living in the Forest of Dean with a young family. And Michelle, who I knew from the Forest of Dean. But it's really hard to get people to pay you.
Something that never changed.
Yeah, so I'd work, and the final crunch came when, D&AD, for instance, they'd take about a year to pay me, and then he'd say, can I round it? And I'd always think, well, that meant, rounding up, usually within rounding down. And then I worked on a big show called Brazilian Contemporary Arts, and I worked on in a few places, Barbican, and one or two of the smaller places. And basically, I put my own money into that, did all the framing, did the movie, because I had a Sherpa band which was kitted out with framing equipment and moving equipment. And so I was earning a lot of money, and then it went bust, and Horst, who ran it, he was a friend of mine, just buggered off to Brazil. And I was left holding a big debt, so I couldn't look after a young family like that. So I applied for a job, and I got a job down in the southwest, but that fell through because the funding fell through. So I came up here, you couldn't get too further apart places, actually, one in Cornwall and one up here, so I came up here.
And do you think leaving London has hindered or supported your career as an artist?
That's an interesting question. I think when I worked at the Land, if I can come at this obliquely rather than a yes or no, when I was running the programme at the Land, we were doing some really bad stuff on performance seasons and things like that. But I really felt that the audience wasn't the same audience that there was at the ICA. The audience at the ICA, it was in inverted commas dangerous work, risky work and everything. But really, everyone that came expected what they were seeing in it, so it wasn't really a challenge to anybody, But coming up here and running these things at the Lane Art Gallery, I think you remember them. I think it was a challenge, wasn't it?
It was good. Yeah. It was better for sure.
Yeah. And I felt like, and the other thing about that, which I also really liked, though it kind of did me in the end, but the Lang is and the museum service, it is part of our democratic society. And as an artist, you can either work within the democratic structure, or you can kind of sit outside it, put your fingers up at it, and hope you get changed that way. And at the time, I really did believe that you should work within and influence within rather than from the outside. I don't think I think that anymore. But that's what I thought then. So you were part of the democratic process, and we are lucky when you see all the dreadful things that are going on around the world with all the dictatorships and all the rest of it. That we do. It's not perfect democracy, but it is a democracy, and so to work within that to affect change felt really important to me. So yes, I thought that. Really, when I came up here, it was important for me to be not doing things that were being done in London, but to be working internationally, which we did. And the idea was to show work that anybody in Paris or Berlin or New York could see. And whether they liked it or not wasn't of a great deal of interest to me. It was the fact that that's what audiences elsewhere were seeing as well. So as people in the north, this idea of cloth cap and whippets really drove me around the bend. And you should be able to see what culture is being seen in capital cities.
And then, of course, you've spent a lot of your career also in education.
I have, yeah.
I wondered if you wanted to just reflect a bit, having now had a couple of years out of that, retired and able to focus on art full time. Do you think if money had been no object, would you prefer to always just be making the art, or do you think actually the time you spent in education has served your art practice?
Again, it's so difficult. I mean, I think my instinct would say, yeah, if somebody left me a fortune, that'd be great. But sometimes, and I know other artists have said this, if you don't have anything to drive you, then sometimes it's quite difficult to, I mean, when you're working full time, it is hard to find the space to do it, but you do it. Whereas if you've got all the time in the world, do you have that same drive? I don't know. But really, I occasionally think about it, but it's a fairly pointless exercise because life is what it is, and I am where I am, and I'm happy. And also, to be fair, there are a lot worse jobs to have than teaching fine art in a university.
Yeah. And certainly it feels like it's been quite fruitful in terms of the way that you collaborate.
Absolutely, and a lot of the work, nearly all the work here, has been done in collaboration with my ex-student and friend Tom Jordan, who's incredibly talented, but also just working. I mean, I ran the foundation course before Joe did, and Joe Woodhouse, Helen's son, built up the foundation course. And I used to walk around the studios there thinking, I wish I could do that. Because there's a freshness about what the students do when they first start. And it was all I could do not to say to them, you'll spend the next 50 years trying to get that sense of freshness back into your work. But that's true as well, I think.
Yeah. I was at a talk earlier this week where making art was described as a compulsion. Do you think that's true for you?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Yes, don't do it, you get depressed, you get ill.
Yeah. I mean, and I suppose I was thinking of that, in particular, thinking about the fact that when you were ill, you couldn't stop making work. So
yeah, the story behind that is really based around this painting and two other prints that I've done. Because I had prostate cancer about 3 years ago, and I thought we cracked it, and then it came back. So I had to have hormone therapy and radiotherapy. And foolishly, I mean, the Freeman, which is just down the road from my studio, really, I thought I'll just go to the Freeman now, go back to the studio, I'll carry on working. But yeah, it was a bit naive, to put it mildly. And I got back home, and there was not a lot to do. And suddenly, I don't know why, I started taking these photographs of shadows with my iPhone. And initially it was just, I thought, well, that's a nice colour. I live in a flat, which I rent, so I can't repaint the walls, but I quite like the colours of the walls. They're purple and blue, teal blue, and kind of green, and lemon yellow, and I call it Buckinghamshire white. I had a look to try and see if I could see what the colours were. So you get really interesting shadows, particularly in the early morning or late evening, and then there's an orange light outside one of the windows in my flat, and that casts great shadows. And I suddenly became obsessed with taking these images, because it was really about all I could do. And I just took them on the iPhone, and on your iPhone that you get like a block of 3 and then another block of 3. So there were 3 blocks of 3, and I suddenly thought, oh, this is quite interesting. So I then started playing around with them. I didn't alter the colour, but I did edit them in terms of cropping and things. And literally that's how those came about. So I did one, which I posted. I posted on Instagram and Facebook just with little poems of poets that I really liked and kind of resonated with the feelings that I was having at the time. And then I built it up into a 9x9 print. And yeah, I mean, it literally came, I had no intention of doing it. It just happened like that. The first one actually was like a golden morning sun on the purple wall and it looked like a Rothko. That's really interesting. So I've taken a few of these that I could, these would influence the paintings that I could do, but composing them took over, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's where, for me, that's where my sort of passion for art is, where I talk to artists and I find myself thinking of their work at other times. And I think with that, when you first talked to me about this shadow piece, I then started noticing shadows and thinking about
Well, a few people in the room here bought the second one I did, and I donated the money to that to prostate cancer research. I had, I know some of you bought it. So I did an edition of 25 and sold 24 each, so that was quite good.
Yeah. And then what made you decide to do it as a painting for this show? Because it seems it's very unusual for you to just do something as straightforward as just paint.
I wanted to paint. I mean, I've done paintings in between.
Yeah.
Just hide them. No, I don't. I mean, that's what I was, a painter. But I mean, there are so many ways of making things that it's really fun to explore different ways of making them, but not lose, I guess, where the ideas come from in the first place. And I had always wanted to paint this. And I had in mind painting this for this show. So that was specifically done for this. And I want to do the other two. I want to paint the other two as well. I can only see myself doing these once in a blue moon because that's the reason for doing it. This is from my time in Japan. I got an artist residency there last year, 3-week residency on Sado Island, which is on the west coast of Japan, in the sea of Japan. And the guy, John, from Sophia University in Tokyo, who organised the residency, has a 10-year relationship with the island, and he absolutely loved it. And he's in the process of buying a Riken, a Japanese inn. And so I had access to that during the whole time I was there. So I would go in early in the morning, midday, evening, at night time, and take these photographs, which I then built up into this piece. So this was actually done in Japan initially. I mean, I made that piece in Japan. And I haven't changed it in terms of the shapes on each of the squares, but they've been simplified just from the colours. So there's no kind of gradation in some of the shades, which there is in some of them. And the idea of the squares, I think, I mean, you never know with these things, do you? But I'd like to think that there's a kind of non-hierarchical approach to this. A, anyone can do it on their iPhone, and B, if you're looking at it, you might kind of subliminally, if not overtly, think, yeah, I think that could be there, and that could be there. You know what I mean? As if you were playing around with it. And I like that idea of it being a bit more democratic.
So I wondered if you wanted to talk a bit more about your time in Japan and how you approached a residency, because you seem to go there not entirely knowing what you're planning to do.
No, well, it wasn't that far. I've only not long finished the old therapy actually, so I was slightly nervous. But I've been going to Japan since 2004, so I think this was my 7th trip over. I've been involved. Well, my first trip was actually to recruit students onto our foundation course. But then I got to meet people over there, and I did. I worked on an exhibition called Wordsworth and Basho, Walking Poets, which was shown at the Wordsworth Trust, and then 2 years later we did another iteration of it just outside Kyoto. And I've gotten to know quite a few people in Japan, and I really like going over there. So when John, who I'd met in 2017 when we did the Wordsworth Basho show, as I say, in Kyoto, he contacted me and was quite keen to get me out to Sado Island. So I very deliberately didn't. I mean, I took my iPhone, I took a sketchbook, and a pack of pencils, and that was it. I went with Hazel. Where's Hazel? Yeah, you went with me. And so we overlapped there. So Hazel also was gone to Sado.
Same thing, I just went to an open mic and took a few things and see. So I responded to other people who did that.
Yeah. So it's just a case of responding to it, making notes, making some diagrams, making some drawings. This one came out of that. and that perspective piece came out of it as well. So it was just about experiencing it really. And the weather was like 30 degrees non-stop all the time I was there, not a cloud in the sky. It was quite interesting. I'd expected that being on an island on the, on the west coast that there would be rain, but it's fantastic. I got to know a botanist there and somebody who's really interested in birds. So I'm applying to go back there for either 3 or 6 months. This time at spring rather than in the summer, because in the summer the birds pretty well stopped singing, and a lot of the really kind of important flowers have gone over as well. There's still lots, but so fingers crossed.
So what is it with birds and bird song, and where does that come from, do you think? When did it start crystallising as an idea of something you could actually transmit into a visual form?
Where did that come from? Well, firstly, when I was much younger, my 2 brothers and I, my mum would take us for walks around the Formby coast, around the Sefton coast, and she was a special needs teacher, but she also loved botany, and she had this little book which I've used subsequently with, which had all the line drawings of all the plants, and she would paint them in as we were walking or stopping and having a look at them. And I guess that was the first time, and I was quite young then, that I really got interested. My brother, Tim, is a wildlife photographer, a bird photographer primarily. So it's obviously, and my other brother was an HR consultant, but also takes photographs of birds and has them commission things. So yeah, there must be something there. In terms of the sound, I think it was when I was doing my PhD, I was looking at phenomenology as a philosophy to kind of ground some aspects of the PhD, and that's about your whole engagement with the world, rather than just a one-dimensional engagement with it. As you walk through the world hits you, and you feel it before you think it. It goes through your body first before you think it. Sound is very good at that, of course, and smells and things like that. And I thought, well, I can't write about this and then just make 2-dimensional pieces. Oh, maybe I could, but we'd see. And Cézanne used to talk about how he wanted people to smell the green of the grass. He wanted them to smell the green of the grass in his paintings. So I wanted to try and find a way of getting some more than just visualization, more than just the visual in it. And then there is also I really enjoyed doing it visually. I thought it seemed to work quite well visually. So it's quite difficult really. On the one hand, you might start with an aim, but then the visual and your 2-dimensional approach can take over. Does that make any sense?
I think so, yeah. I often find it sort of interesting that for something so rooted in nature, you always end up with something that's quite abstract. And I wonder how much that is a deliberate trying to keep pushing, keep abstracting, basically from nature as far as you can.
Well, again, it's like, so if I think back to my childhood when we're walking through the dunes from Formby Station, you go through the pine woods, you go through the dunes, you get to the sea, and there's a whole experience of different plants, different birds, different trees, different grass, and you can't paint. I can't paint that. I mean, I'm not saying if you did it that would be wrong, but to me, how do I capture that experience of all of these experiences? So that's why working in an abstract way, I found, or semi-abstract way, I guess, I found to be the best way. Rather than that sense you have of a perspectival painting of a scene where you are an observer looking into the painting. It's trying to find a way of all these experiences that you've had just coming to fruition within an image.
And then, so how is it you decide, because obviously you work with a lot of different media, how is it you decide which direction to take an idea or is there a lot of experimentation that goes on when you're trying to take an idea and put it into a visual form?
There's a lot of experimentation, and I think that's where working collaboratively really helps, because I might have an idea which I don't know how to make it, and I talk to Tom, say, and he'll suddenly come up with some ideas of, maybe we could try that, maybe we could have a go at that. And at other times I have the idea, but I have no idea how it's going to work. I mean, like Neil with that window that we did, I mean, that's a crazy thing to do. I mean, it was the most ridiculous thing to do in terms of time and effort. But I really wanted it. You just wanted this window that was going to be like a layer of fabric. What do you call it when you transfer on that?
I came to Mike and asked for some coloured transparency to put on our hallway window, and then Mike right away came back with this crazy before the big slab of stained glass.
Well, I said, you can't do that to a window. We've got to do proper stained glass.
Yeah.
And you didn't have the money. And that was fine, because you still have things now.
Yeah.
That was the deal, wasn't it?
Straight up credit, you know.
Yeah.
And do you tend to work on many projects at the same time, or are you quite sort of focused in on one piece at a time?
For a period, I'll be focused in on one thing, but I think you build up different strategies then for approaching what I find difficult sometimes is that on the one hand, do you believe in a sense of oneness with the universe? I'll get very philosophical now, but do you believe that somewhere or other, it was kind of in that film around there is that sense of wholeness, implicate order, I think, philosopher, David Bohm called. But at the same time, the world is really shitty now, but it's also full of many beautiful things and full of diversity. And I do. That's probably why I work in different ways as well. It's trying to, on the one hand, explore the idea of unity, but at the same time recognise that difference is absolutely crucial, both societally within art and in politics as well.
Yeah, and how much time do you think? I'm just thinking about your sort of process for making. So if you have to divide up between the thinking and the planning and the actual making, is there a sort of order to it, or is it very, very varied from piece to piece?
Yeah, but there's usually 2 bins full of failures.
I was going to ask you about that as well, actually, and how much of your work gets rejected and thrown out, and
Well, this is a good example. I mean, this came about because when I was in Japan, we were in Kirishima, which is the north end of the island, which is where Hazel was as well. And say Kirishima, is it Kitoishima or Kitishima? Yeah. Anyway, just off the coast there are some rocks which are quite prominent and really quite fascinating. But around those rocks, there's dozens and dozens of Pacific swifts just flying around. And obviously, the swifts don't sing, but they make chirps and noises. And on the basis of the work I've been doing previously on sound, I wanted to try and capture that. Because it was a very important thing. I mean, you could go and you could just lie on your back on the rock and you just see the swifts flying around. It was one of John's favourite places. If I couldn't find it, I knew where to go. But I tried to do it with sound, and I can't tell you how awful they were. I spent about well over a week with Tom, and I had a whole wall full of these awful images. I've kept one just to remind myself how bad things can be. And it just wasn't working. And I sat down, I came in the next week, I just got a piece of paper, and I just went like this, thinking of the swift swooping around. And that was so much better than this, week-long effort to try and capture something. So all these marks here are actually, all these shapes are actually my hand-drawn ones, but then computerized. So I literally just sat and drew these, and I've got the drawing from it, which I really like actually. It's unusual. So and then it's kind of how are you going to do. So then it became developing it as an art piece. I knew I was getting somewhere with it finally. And then it went through another few stages before you get to this stage.
And how do you know then when it's reached the stage that it's done?
That's such a difficult question.
Is it just intuitive?
It
Is
is
experience?
Yeah, it is. I mean, how have you made your own? When I was a student, no, you can teach me, but when we were students, we were told, A, not to take photographs of the work you're doing, because you become too precious about it. If you think you like it, then push it further and see how far you can destroy it. And that was what was it, wasn't it? So there is an element of pushing things that then you have to step back. I mean, I still have a bit of that. You have to step back from. I mean, all my work I did at Goldsmiths got burnt when I left. Because if you didn't pick it up, I had 8 foot by 4 foot pieces, which I hadn't left the store anyway. And I wasn't sorry. I am now, but I wasn't then. They just all got burnt. So I don't have photographs of them. I don't have any record of them. It's slightly sad. I didn't tell students to do that.
I don't think you'd be able to stop them photographing things now.
Yeah.
Everyone has a camera. I wondered if you could tell us a bit about how you made the selection for this show, because obviously you're very prolific as an artist, and particularly I feel like since you stopped teaching and really sort of dedicated full time to making, how did you sort of decide which bits to pull together into what we see here?
I wanted the show, this is a really important show for me. I wanted to kind of put together a small show that contained the essence of the work I've been doing for the last 2 or 3 years, to try and bring it together. I know there's quite a few differences, but I see a wholeness in it. I mean, I was talking to Stuart Mel Wilson earlier on. I was looking, he was saying about this piece here, and he said to him it represented the kind of sound waves in the universe, as well as the absolutely spot on. It's lovely when somebody reads your painting as different, or your print as different layers of meaning in it. I don't know if you've read Rebecca's great essay in there, you'll find, but this one and the one over there are 2 pieces from a series of 7 that are currently in an animation which I did for the Albert Kahn Centre in London. This is called The Valley of Wonderment, and that's called The Valley of Love. And the pieces are based on Attar's 12th century Persian poem, The Conference or the Canticles of the Birds. And you have the hoopoe leads a group of birds through 7 valleys in order to find the Simorgh, and the Simorgh is like the god. And so they go through these 7 valleys, which each have a different name. And when they finally get to the 7th valley, it's called the Valley of Annihilation. It sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? But the idea of that is that your sense of self becomes annihilated, but you become part of the world. You become part of the universe. And the birds realise that in fact they are the Simorgh, and the Simorgh is them. Which I think it's a fantastic poem. So that's what these are. But these are animated with Jeff Sample, who I work a lot with as well on sounds. So there's a video of 15 minutes long with each of the 7 valleys.
What made you decide then to move into moving image animation? Because that's a new thing for you, yes?
It was,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, it was just playing around with things with Tom. And he put a little thing together for to show some work I was doing a couple of years ago. And it just looked really Yeah, it looked like we could do it as an animation. And then Esther and Kyra at Art Khan Centre said, "Can you do an animation for this?" And we said, "Yeah," not realising how difficult it would be. But it's been really fruitful. I mean, these took probably around 2 months working solidly most days to do each one, and we were toing and froing with the sound of the birds, the sonograms of the birds, Jeff's sounds, which he was then mixing, and then our digitization and building up the image of the pictures. I mean, I think that I'd stripped away the outside of these, which are in the animation, because they didn't work on a large scale like that. So I was happy to lose that, but just keep that. Just in terms of working with people, I do remember as well, some of you will remember Ayako Tani. I don't know if any of you remember Ayako, who worked at the Glass Centre for a long time. She's now working in Glasgow. And I just had this idea to do a dawn chorus chandelier. And I said to her, "Do you think we could do a dawn chorus chandelier?" And she said, "Yeah." And that's what I really like, is people who say, "Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, we can have a go at it even if it doesn't work." And that the dawn chorus has been a consistent theme throughout my work. I meant to say that in terms of the, how long, why did I work with birds? How many people here have heard of dawn chorus? Brilliant. Yeah. I think it's it's the eighth wonder of the world, really. That along with the Starling Murmuration. And they're just amazing. And I've wanted for years to try and capture that. And I've got a lot of images that's still a theme that I'm working on. I did a show at Cheeseburn with a sound artist and composer there. And that was the start of a series of works that I've been doing over years on dawn chorus.
So I don't know if you know yet what's next, but do you want to tell us a bit about what you've got coming up?
The next thing that I've got on the cards, well, two things. I've got to get this application off to Japan to hopefully get the residency there. But the next piece is going to be, well, there's two things actually. The next exhibition is going to be at Queen's Hall, Hexham, in about a year from now. But in between times, I've donated a lot of the work that I did in the 2010s to the Freeman. So they're going to be putting those up in the next month. So I'll probably put some stuff on Instagram. But the staff were fantastic. They were really good. But the environments are a bit desultory. I mean, it's just white walls, or the odd photograph of the Angel of the North, or something like that. But I think colour can really lift your spirits. I really believe that. And I hope initially when people look at the work, it lifts their spirit. You can begin to look at it in more detail, and there are layers in the work. But if somebody just says, "I like that," I'm quite happy actually. I don't want to make work. I have spent many, many years presenting very difficult, awkward, challenging work. But that wasn't me, But I did it because I think it's important that people see it. But this is who I am, not that.
We've
Yeah.
run our time, but do other people have burning questions for Mike? Now's the time to ask. He said he's going to answer anything.
Helen.
There's so much that I want to ask you, Mike, and thank you for this conversation. I'll start with where you make so I'm really interested in how you use colour, and it's something that I'm very close to in my own practice, and I'm constantly thinking about how I use colour as a language and the importance of colour to me.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether you could speak a bit more about your choice of colour, where that comes from, and how you're using that to add another layer to meaning.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Helen. Firstly, being out and about is really important for the memories. I mean, I call up on memories of Sarawak, Flora and Sarawak, memories of Flora on Sado Island. So memory of a place, those experiences I talked about before, that's really important. But I also kind of liken it to playing the piano. You know, because you've been in my studio, there's colours everywhere. And so it's like playing the piano, but the keys are colours the other way around. And it's an intuitive approach. I mean, I've done a lot of work on colour theory with students and things, but I'm sure that probably helps. You know, like John, it would help if you know how to, you know, your music theory if you're going to play. But ultimately, it's intuitive. Just a mixture of opening your eyes to what's around. But the other thing I have to say is, and I do wonder this, I mean, what on earth makes somebody walk through a landscape and have ideas in your head as you're walking through about artwork you're going to make? I mean, most people don't do that. So it's a strange thing. Neil?
I think what's always exciting and enjoyable about your exhibition is the mix of media. And I've seen your studio, pastels that you have, and some work with glass. Do you have a favourite? If not,
That's a good question. Neil used to have the studio next to me at Baltic 39. No. Though, well, I think if I started again, I don't regret anything really, because as I say, you are where you are, but I'd like to have been able to do more in glass. I think glass is a fantastic medium, and unfortunately, we're about to lose the National Glass Centre, which is terrible.
I was there today, incredible show.
It's an amazing show.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yes, well said. I absolutely recommend that. One of the best shows I've seen. It's some fabulous work. Yeah, it's just that sense of colour. It's not just flat. I mean, I like flat colour. You know, you think about Matisse's Vane's decorations in the chapel at Vane. I mean, they're just stunning. They're kind of. I mean, he wasn't himself religious, but they are religious sensibilities in them. They're just beautiful. Donna.
Yeah, so I heard you talking about the fact that for you art is a compulsion. Right? So my question is, let's say you didn't have a show on, right? Like you weren't commissioned to do a show or there was nothing on. Would you still be as motivated to think about what am I going to make? You know, would you still be as motivated to do art?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. Would I? It's funny. It's so interesting you say it, because I was actually thinking about that yesterday and this morning. So the next thing, I have got another thing to come. There is usually one thing after another, but I quite like the idea that I've got a year to work on that now, so that I can actually explore some more ideas without having to have the deadline. Deadlines are dead useful, I have to admit, and it may be because I've worked most of my life. So, you know, I'm kind of aware of that. So it may be built into the way that you become. I mean, I think if artists, I like to have an idea behind the work, so it's semi-abstract. I mean, I really admire artists who just go in and paint. I mean, I think that's fantastic. And don't worry about, you know, whether there's an exhibition coming or whether it means anything. They just do it. Thank God. There are artists that do that and bring that sense of joy or angst or whatever into the world. I do like to have something to think about. And it's partly as well because, I mean, we often talk about what's going on in the world and all the trouble, and how as an artist do you deal with that? How can you rationalise what you're doing in the face of all of that? And there certainly is a driving force to try and do some good rather than just go, isn't it terrible? I mean, you wrote about it very well at the beginning there, really. That's why the show's called A Sense of Wonder, because there is such, I mean, you know, I've I've lived through some awful times, and at the moment it's about as bad as it's been for a long time. And you wonder whether there's any value in behind the studio and making pretty pictures or whatever. But I believe there is, and I believe that if you don't hold on to that sense of inquiry, that sense of wonder, of what a joy it is to be alive, you're actually doing a disservice to those people who are being slaughtered. I mean, it might sound a bit naive and trite, but that's the best answer I come up with. I mean, either that or go over to Gaza and actually do some good.
Anyone else got questions? I mean, I feel like I could keep asking you questions forever, but I'm sure we will continue chatting over the years. But yeah, thank you very much for answering all my questions, and I know Mike will be happy to answer any further if anyone does.
I certainly will. I mean, it's very difficult when you have a lifetime work behind to try and explain all of that in 40 minutes, but that's what there is in these. It isn't just, dear, it comes out, you know that as well, don't you? It comes out of years of thinking about what you're going to do with it, playing around.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
everyone.
Well, thanks everyone for coming.